Christine, should we get started?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening on TBS Live. Today we have the third of a four-part lecture series on art and history. Today we're delighted to be joined by Ms. Mandara Rao. And if I may request Ms. Christine Michaels, the head of the Visual Dramatic Arts Department, without whom none of this would have been possible, to introduce our guests before we start the session.
Thank you so much, Sean. Good afternoon to the TBS students and also parents and staff who are here. Welcome to our third lecture in the art history series of talks. I also extend a very warm welcome to our speaker for the evening, Mandara Rao, from the Amarnath Sehgal Museum, which is based here in Delhi. It's a new museum and it's been built in the home of the artist. She's going to take us on a journey to understand one of India's most famous 20th century sculptors with very perceptive insights into his artistic sort of versatility that extends to other forms of art as well, painting, poetry, graphics, and also tapestries besides sculpture. We hope to make a visit to the museum when the lockdown lifts, maybe in January next year, to see the collection firsthand. So thank you, Mandira, for taking time out to share your expertise with us. For our audience, please ensure that your audio and camera is on mute. And at the end of the talk, please feel free to raise your hand with questions, and we will put that to the speaker. I would like to again thank the TBS Live team for helping us put the details of this lecture series together. So over to you, Mandira. Amarnath Sehgal, his life and times.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, students and faculty of the British School. Christine, thank you so much for introducing me. That's very kind. We at the Amarnath Sehgal Private Collection are thrilled to be sharing the life of the artist. And as you know, the museum is based in Jangpura, a repository of artworks and archives of the artist. So I'm going to take you through a short presentation, followed by a walkthrough, and then a short clip of a film that was shot by Rajiv Mehrotra. To introduce Sehgal when he was younger, I would say that he described himself as a quiet boy who spent a lot of his time alone and outdoors admiring nature. He began drawing on the ground and in sand, making clay models as a child. That's when his actual interest in art blossomed. And he called this a relationship between him and his art. He called it a companionship that he never felt alone with. So here I've got a timeline of his life that just give you a basic perspective. He was born in 1922 in Pakistan, Campbellpur, and this reminds me that next year we will be celebrating his centenary year. Following his education in 1941, he studied science, and then from physics, he also did chemistry, and then got a job as an engineer. Again, he spent 1 year working as an engineer and then moved on to studying art in Lahore. He went to the Lahore College of Fine Arts and studied under Mr. B.C. Sanyal. In 1947, he was forced to migrate into New Free India. And after spending some time here, he decided to go to America for further studies. And in America, he spent a majority of his time in his studio, as you can see in the lower picture over here. America was a different kind of struggle altogether, and back then they called it the village. I think they still do. Was a vibrant artist community, and he spent time with artists like Jackson Pollock and Tony Smith, who I would say was his initial exposure to international art. After he finished his education and he worked there in the studio, he came back to, he traveled to Europe and Africa extensively. He had multiple shows. He did a solo in Paris, and he went to Africa, where he was asked and commissioned a bust of His Highness Aga Khan. And following which he came back to India. And this is where, on returning, he started working extensively in rural India. He started working with folk arts and reviving tribal art. And in 1955, in fact, he was appointed by UNESCO to study and survey folk arts. and appointed as an art consultant for the Ministry of Development and Cooperation. Can we move to the next slide? So I'm going to go back to a major event in his life, which was partition of India. What you can see here is, I just want to give you this is a satellite image of on Google Maps that I've taken, just for you to understand the geographical displacement in his life at that time. He had to leave home overnight, like millions of other people. And I would say when independence was announced, and while the country was meant to be celebrating the end of the colonial rule, in fact, millions were hit terribly by the effect of communal violence, mass migration, and massacres. And he got to witness it firsthand, of course, because he was, traveling through. Yes, the next slide, please. So this is another image just to give you an insight. Many of them walked distances, trains and trucks were carrying families on both sides. Many of them who never made it to the other side, in fact. There was just so much pain and suffering that Sehgal got to witness, leaving everything, He left his home, he left everything he ever had, and with the fear and the anger and just the violence in the name of community and religion, it left deep scars in the memories of this young man. He was such a compassionate soul. He really connected with people in pain. And he witnessed families lose their loved ones and women ill treatment and just genocide in large. His former years was really influenced by this event, and his thinking of an artist actually transformed majorly. I think his pain also was reflected in his work, as you can see. I would say tragedy shaped his work. Anguished Cries is on your left on the screen here. And on the right, you can see Cries Unheard. It's depicting a family suffering, mourning, and raising their hands upward, looking in despair and sheer hopelessness. In fact, he was awarded a gold plaque for the President's Award in 1958 for this work. So I'm going to give you a glimpse through his life in general. He traveled extensively for shows and received a fellowship by the Ford Foundation. He traveled to the US, Scandinavia, Germany, France, all over, showcasing his work, doing multiple solo shows. Over here also you can see he traveled quite a bit. Here I mentioned just between the 60s and 70s is how, as he traveled and he showcased at different places. This particular image is his show in Belgrade, where he did again another solo. Over this period, he traveled extensively, creating new works, and he lived abroad for a really long time. Yeah. This particular show is again in Paris in MoMA, and this is one of his most celebrated shows. He was the first Indian, actually is maybe still the only, to showcase at the Museum of Modern Art in Paris, have a solo, that is. And this is one of his biggest achievements, actually, to be showcasing. He spent a lot of his years living in Luxembourg, and from there, he also traveled quite a bit, showcasing at various countries in Europe. If you can see the picture on the right top is Pierre Warner, the Prime Minister of Luxembourg, at his exhibition in 1980. And this is when he was becoming a celebrated artist in Luxembourg and Europe in general. Coming back to India, this is in 1957. The Nehru government commissioned a work by the artist to make one of the largest murals in the country at that time. It was for a prominent building in New Delhi, which is the Vigyan Bhavan. In 1979, the government had dismantled it without his consent. It's about 2,000 feet of bronze. And they dismantled it, and it was mishandled and completely decapacitated, and they didn't ask him. And in fact, for a decade, he fought the Union of India, making it a landmark case in New Delhi. he fought and won this case, and which upheld the morals and for copyrights for artists all over. In fact, he said the author has a right to preserve, protect, and nurture his creation through his moral rights. A creative individual is uniquely invested, and the power and mystique of original genius creating a privileged relationship between a creative author and his work. So this obviously was one of his biggest achievements and a lot of work. Yeah, thank you. Another significant sculpture of his time is the Monument to Aviation. This is in the Old Palam Airport in New Delhi, and this actually showcased his kinetic sculpture on large scale. As you know, he studied science and he enjoyed adding elements of water and wind in his sculptures, and well, being an engineer paid off. So movement through wind and water was something he enjoyed making part of his sculptures, and this was a massive sculpture that was erected at the airport, which is still there right now. Yeah. I chose to show you this work because I thought it was very significant. This is Mr. Sehgal and his work, Crushing Burden, in 1984, unveiled in the Second World Population Conference in Mexico. I think now it was later in the UN headquarters, and it portrays agony over the still unsolved problem of population explosion. His composition here shows Mother being crushed and under the burden of humanity. I thought this was very significant for today because he was trying to create awareness of a rising problem, which is now a global crisis today. So, yeah. I'm going to talk about towards the end of his life. He said that as an artist, you never retire. He spent most of his time in his studio, creating and making more work. He also started the Creative Fund, a non-profit, to support emerging young artists and talent. And that's why it's so important for us to be a part of this outreach program with students like yourself today, which is keeping this legacy going. Yes, slide. Just an interesting piece of information is that he dedicated a sculpture in memory of John Lennon after his death in New York. This is in his memorial, Strawberry Fields in Central Park. And for all you Beatle fans, I can safely say that he was one too. So yeah, this is just published also. Next slide, please. So this is just to give you a glimpse of all the sculptures that he has in and around Delhi. This I've just picked out a few. He's contributed a lot to public art, and these are few of the pieces that you'll see around. I couldn't put all of them together, but yeah, this is just to give you a glimpse of the scale. And there's one in Yamuna Sports Complex. It's called the Acrobat. Oberoi Hotel also has quite a few of his works, and the Ford Foundation, also again another kinetic sculpture, was put up a couple of decades ago. So this is just to give you a glimpse of his life and the beginning of his life. And I want to take you through the next part, which is our walkthrough. Yeah.
Welcome to the Amarnath Sehgal Private Collection. Thank you for joining us. We're all set to take you on a tour of our museum. What you're looking at is the entrance and the lower ground floor of the museum space. An interesting fact is that it used to be the workspace and studio of the artist himself. So while the space was getting ready to hold his collection, a conscious decision was taken to hold on to the basic structure of the studio. This was to keep alive the essence of his space. This is where the artist created some of the most iconic works of his time. He spent a lot of his time over here. Some of his achievements have been portrayed on this wall of pictures with art connoisseurs and officials he has met through the years of his career. This is Mrs. Coretta Scott King, wife of Martin Luther King. She is looking at the work Monument to Love and Nonviolence. The abstract form symbolizing two people here, Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our nation, who fought for independence, and Martin Luther King, who also was an activist and leader of the civil rights movement. The water here depicts the ideals that they had, which will keep flowing until the world is enlightened. Now, here we have the sculpture of Mahatma Gandhi's bust in Luxembourg in a public park. On the 158th birthday of Mahatma Gandhi, the Luxembourg government released a commemoration stamp with the image of the bust in it to mark the special occasion. Here is the picture of President Jimmy Carter, who unveiled the Rising Spirit in 1978 with Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, the Minister of External Affairs. The sculpture represents the human spirit and strong will of the minds that will take the country into the future. This is currently at the White House. Here is a picture of Yuri Gagarin and his wife with the Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. After achieving a major milestone in space in 1961, the first human journey into space, the sculpture, a very powerful symbol of its time, depicting joy of man at the victory over space. Among his other contributions to science, the two other sculptures that I'd like to mention are Conquest of the Moon in 69, which is now currently at the White House, and Hamara Akash in 1982, which literally means the space is ours, celebrating India's first satellite. Many of Amarnath Sehgal's works have been dedicated to world peace and social equality. Now I'm going to talk about the cricketer, a sculpture that was gifted to the Pakistan cricket team when they visited India in 1961. That's the captain, Fazal Mahmood. It was an iconic milestone considering the history both countries have shared with their turbulent relationship. Dr. S. Radhakrishnan at the Rashtrapati Bhavan with a bust presented by the artist. The artist was always inspired by people who worked for progress and change. His devotion to making busts was a form of making their ideals immortal in time. After returning from the US, Mr. Sehgal had spent time in rural India in Jharsa, Haryana. He spent time with artists and craftsmen from folk and tribal parts. Living in the underdeveloped parts of the country, Sehgal's style of work as well as his concepts were influenced deeply. Tyranny is his work that symbolizes a passionate quest for social justice and human dignity. Rise and Herd, which talk about poverty and hunger. Onward March and Tussle talk about economic conditions and the nature of life there is. Sehgal's favorite mediums were clay, ceramic, and bronze. What he described of them were docile, susceptible, and most of all, fluid, rather than wood or stone, which were more rigid. Another one of his bronze sculptures, Atomic Heads, is conceptualized after the tragedy of Hiroshima. Shiva the Dancer, another early work of his, focuses on creation, destruction, and preservation, which legend always associated with the god Shiva in our country. Sehgal's use of clay, the texture and fluidity, brings its own sense of movement to the sculpture. Here is a wall of some of his achievements. His work Rise and Herd won him the Presidential Award of the National Academy of Arts, currently in NGMA. Another one is the UN Peace Medal he received in 1985 for another work. And of course, the prestigious Padma Bhushan Award. The Padma Bhushan Award was received by his wife at the Rashtrapati Bhavan on behalf of the artist. Sehgal has always been a poet, a tireless promoter of peace, and lived with the purpose to sow seeds of compassion and love in human beings. Stepping out, I'm going to show you another interesting part of our museum, which is the outdoor space. It's actually quite beautiful in the winter. Here I'm going to show you first this huge mold and the sculpture being in the Yamuna Sports Complex. Here is another famous work, Anguish Cries, which is an edition of 3. One in Berlin, the other at the NGMA, and the third is here. The bronze symbolizes the tragedy of people who are the victims of hunger, mass starvation, and using the expressionist technique, he has linked the forms of faces, which is very much his style, creating a tragic shrillness in drama. He's expressed immense pain, howling faces, which became his monumental sculpture for communal unity. What he witnessed as a young man during partition, he absolutely understood helplessness, grief, and death. He portrays the aftermath of partition, victims of war, and condition of women in such places. Ishwar Allah Teri Naam. Sehgal made this sculpture in 1969. The agony and the suffering of the people has always prompted deep emotional turmoil in his mind. About 10 feet high and 2,000 kilos of concrete. If you look at it, there are two sides to the actual sculpture. As a part of the poem, he explains the sculpture. He wrote, like the two sides of a leaf that are inseparable, they are to be one and united. The leaf is a rock and erect and adamant in its existence in this great ocean of humanity. There's Devanagari script on one side and Urdu on the other, and they both mean the same. The work was inspired after the communal strife that tore the country. Now that we've seen the beautiful outside space, let's go back inside and check out the second bit of our museum, which is the upper ground floor. These are few of the tapestries that were designed and conceptualized by him. 12 of these were shown in Dubai. Sehgal had gone and made these pieces with master craftsmen in Varanasi. Each of these are a lively demonstration of his feelings, both spiritual and aesthetic. He experimented to see how his art would come out in different textures. Here is a series of digital works and posters by the artist. These posters are about different shows in different parts of the world that he'd covered. One of the posters I can talk about here is about drug abuse from young adults. And inspired from one of his drawings, which we have right here for you. This was drawn in 1989 in Luxembourg, as you can see, which inspired a lot of his posters, especially this one. Coming to the Ark is a bronze sculpture, and what is unique about this is he experimented with wood being the mold rather than plaster of Paris or another form of metal. So what you can see in the forms over here are mostly naturally made with the wood. Moving on, let's go to the next part of our museum, which is up here, the second floor. We've got a lot of drawings by Sehgal, which has been put up here. The curatorial design of this space has been done by Prima Kurian. So first we're going to start with the cityscapes. As you can see, these are the landscapes and cityscapes done by Amarnath Sehgal. These are one of his earlier works when he was in New York. Right up here is the New York skyline in different variations. Sehgal's journey has been about blending poetry and graphics. So here we have a poem that depicts all his works in this section. His earliest work here is from 1952 to 1969. The poem Search is deriving his personal story in the art. Moving on to his study of human body and anatomy. What is amazing on this wall is you can see the diversity of style and culture that he's brought out. The lines drawn with sensitivity have grown over the years. His earliest work here is from 1947 and goes on to 1969. Next, we have epic episodes. Epic episodes is the interpretation of the mythology stories of Ramayana and Mahabharata. One of his works is Bhishma's Advice. This is his interpretation of the Kurukshetra war, and as you can see the faces that he's drawn there, as soon as you look at it, in fact, you would easily tell that this is Sehgal's work. This has become his unique style. Paintings normally reflect the intellectual attainment fused with past, present, and future blossoming in our thoughts. You can see that there is inspiration from Cubist, Surrealist, and abstract forms in his drawings. Here there is more defined as well as lucid strokes in his experimentation with just human heads. Many of these drawings have later developed and inspired his sculptures. Here you can see the faces develop stronger, reflecting human suffering. As we move to this collection of drawings, Mr. Sehgal has beautifully captured motion in human bodies, bringing out the stillness from around. Here as well, as an artist, he brings out character in expressionist details. For Sehgal, art is truthfulness, dedication, and expression of beauty. In fact, when he was younger, Sehgal survived on $1 a week for years. He took up a small unheated apartment in New York and made it his studio and living space. He had about 7 jobs, just washing dishes, painting Christmas dolls, and giving lectures at museums, basically trying to make ends meet. In fact, he always said that money is not the measure of success. Success is in terms of contentment. Spoken like a true artist, right? He wanted to add value through his work in society. Moving on to our next sculpture is a very interesting and historic piece, The Captive. This sculpture is a replica of the original, designed by the artist for the UN Conference on Sanctions against South Africa in 1986, highlighting their opposition to the apartheid regime. His style here reminds me of the early caricatures of Picasso. The sculpture has been the symbol of the spirit of those who refused to bow to tyranny, dedicated to Nelson Mandela. Later installed in 2011 at Robben Island, it stands as a reminder for the time Nelson Mandela spent in prison. Now we're moving on to the next and final segment of our museum. We have a set of 11 drawings called the Ganesha series. Ganesha is accepted all over as the god of compassion. Ganesha has human attributes as well as characteristics like love and compassion. Sehgal made the Ganesha series in New York after a sleepless night on hearing the Gulf War that broke out, as though it's questioning why is this war even happening. Ganesha depicts solace, comfort, power and hope for those suffering. Its red eyes, almost painfully compassionate and wanting to lend peace. Moving on to our next sculpture, Nurturing the Flower and Fragrance, made by Sehgal in 1989. This is a homage to Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. In fact, he's always been a great patron of the arts for India. The sculpture is about the dreams of a man building a nation, reborn and independent. The flower represents Nehru, and the fragrance is the country he once started to build. Sehgal never feared to share his views and fought for what is right. A messenger of peace and a humanist, it is always shown in his work. Today, his legacy lives on as the Amarnath Sehgal Private Collection, as we aim to foster a dialogue between the modern master and the contemporary world. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you over.
Thank you. Are we showing the film now?
Yeah. This is Rajiv Mehrotra's film, right?
Yeah, this is Rajiv Mehrotra's film, and I've taken out a clip from it. So. I think it's stuck.
Speak of speechless form, the feeling you contain in thy movement and gestures, every fiber of your veins. The coolness of blood and warmth produce mighty torrents and waves that toss the life's boat from the abyss to the graves. I wish to hold my tears from what you convey, lest I become one as still as you stay. I must say there were a couple of critics that damaged me for years. I would shed tears how they would treat me. Till I had the first exhibition in Europe. And when I was invited to the Paris Museum of Modern Art, which is the greatest museum of the world, where even Picasso and others were respected, and there when I felt that my work was understood and the big halls of a big museum were open for my work, one-man show, I felt that my work was worthy enough to be reviewed by people. The responsiveness of the society is very essential. Let me say that while the ego of a person, unless, and especially of a creative artist, unless it is fully satisfied, it cannot lead to further creative work. If it is completely annihilated, well, it does not give much of a pleasure. You know, unless success comes to you, you don't feel. Otherwise, you might call your work a freak. You might call your work as if it's good for nothing. Slowly and gradually, if one pushes and pushes himself to the extent that one is understood, then everybody catches on. I mean, like a herd of cattle, everybody says, oh, he's selling well, I must buy also. Well, I returned to the West many times for exhibitions and for work, and it has been a very exhilarating experience because here I feel that coming from the East and intermingling of culture, bringing the culture of the East to the West, and going back with my experiences also enriches me. I created the sculpture on Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi. They were great people, and I felt how to depict love and nonviolence into form. I created that feeling of love, of nonviolence, through rhythmical form. Well, the artist of the East works with the spirit. He's more contemplative. He goes deep inside himself. He likes to meditate. He likes to see things as they emerge from within. While the artist in the Occidental culture in the West wishes more to deal with the form. He will hold two forms together and call it a sculpture. Well, of course, that may have a meaning, may have an aesthetics, but it will not be a sculpture which could be full of emotions. So the artist of the East brings out the feeling and form and emotions in a creative form in a much simpler way because he's so wedded to the feelings, he's so wedded to the form and bring the intermingling of the form to the emotion. One very simple fact of Indian tradition is continuity. We believe in the continuity of life. We believe in the rhythm of life. Whatever you may say, my work has certain rhythmical influences, whether it's purely aesthetical, or whether it is humanistic, or whether it has some emotional connotations. Because that rhythm is a part of the heritage I have inherited. I am not concerned with anything else, with anything which is angular. I am concerned with something which is continuous. And rhythm is a part of continuity, which is a part of our heritage. Well, in music I feel the same, because music comes to you with unseen waves to the auditory senses. I feel in the same way you can produce the musical notes in the form which can come to you in the visual senses. And I have been experimenting with these forms, bringing forth as much as possible the rhythm of forms, the symphonic effects, the elating effects, and so on and so forth. I feel that art itself can bring music even to the eyes and the mind. There is certainly a metaphysical in the creative process, because some spirit has to take charge of it. And the spirit that is within you is the unconscious element. It slowly and gradually emerges. It is through the play activity that it emerges, it comes forth. The craft comes forth to the extent that, well, you have to hold form. You have to hold material. You have to obey a certain sense of gravity. You have to see that, well, the form exists, it stands. It stands on its own feet. Well, one never knows where is heaven or where is hell. The only thing what one feels is the satisfaction to live for the moment. And that satisfaction to live is to live a good, honest life and living, and be involved with work. Karma is the only way to go to heaven, and I feel very strongly about it. I found that bronze is the best wholesome medium in which you can find that all the effects can be produced, even malleability of the metal can produce wonderful effects. You can get wonderful colors. And then it's an age-old medium, which is a permanent medium. I think, to an extent, bronze is the medium which can take, in a very strong way, the forms, and the forms will never change in entirety or in proportions. The form will stay stable, which cannot stay stable in a medium like clay or plaster. I feel my work has a consciousness of history. I feel that there is some permanency about work. That even after thousands of years, when they are dug, they will still be there. They are all bronzes. They have to be there, even if they have to survive the catastrophe of war and of nuclear blast or whatever it may come.
15 in the morning found a 400-pound bomb with a destructive force of 20,000 tons of TNT mushrooming up over the stunned Kennedy City. to the frightened inhabitants, the end of the world had come. 90,000 buildings had been completely destroyed. The crippling blast area had reached out its deadly fingers to a distance of 4 miles from the center of the detonation. And the victims of a
if we speak about North, South, and Third World and what have you, then I also feel that Amarnath Segal is, and at another point for him in my eyes, he is not only an artist for the sake of art and the messages of art, but he is, in a way, a politician, as he seems to me to be deep-rooted in the old cultural traditions of his own country. I mean, fighting for or seeking for more humanity is always seeking for more democracy in society, in running a state, principles of order, or whatever is necessary to make life of men suitable.
My ambition in life is pure and simple, to be creative, to bring forth my creative work as simply as possible to humanity and bring humanism to the fore. Judgment is for the society. I'm nobody, I'm only to bring my work. First is my own admiration to myself, whether I have done the right work. It is for the humanity, it is for the society to judge how they feel about it.
Thank you so much. So yeah, this movie was made in the 80s, I think 81 or 82 by Rajiv, and he documented his life, and this was just a bit of it. The rest of the movie is actually available on YouTube for anybody who's interested to see it. You can have a look there.
Okay, thank you so much, Mandira. That was so exciting to see that, firstly, he was trained as an engineer and then he moved to art. So for all those art students out there, you can still do business management and art. Or you can train as an engineer and also do art. And then what is so interesting is that you've been able to share with us all this primary archival, sort of material, which is very special because it really shows you the man and his working sort of environment. And I found it interesting that he's not in that Bombay, Bengal, Baroda art circles. He came out of Mayo College of Art, Lahore, and he had a completely different sort of trajectory, and also along with B.C. Sanyal. So, thank you for sharing all of that. And what was interesting to me was, of course, that he also responded to, the world events like the bomb, like the partition. And, at the end of the day, art always communicates, the entire world feelings about these sort of events. And that was very, very moving. And I'm sure next time I go to Palam Airport, I will make it a point to look for that sculpture. I mean, I'm sure I've seen it, but I've never noticed it, per se. So I'd like...
It's still there, but they've actually taken it down, but it's there, but it's not...
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'd like to throw it open now, please, for some questions from our audience. Can you raise your hand, please? Yes, Asmi Agarwal.
Yeah. So my question was that I found it interesting that he did poetry. So did he base a lot of his art on poetry or vice versa?
Yeah. Hi, Asmi, and thank you for your question. Yes, he did actually write. A lot of his work came out from his poetry. So if you actually look at his drawings and his poetry, you'd notice that he'd first write his poems and then he'd sort of draw it out, and then from there he would take it on to make it a sculpture. So it was a sort of like always start from a poem most of the time.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Govind has his hand up. Yes, Govind.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed the session. And I just wanted to ask that in the virtual museum tour they showed one of his kinetic sculptures with the water flowing, and they talked about how it symbolized like the flowing of Martin Luther King and Gandhi's idea, and how they'll like keep flowing forever. So you also mentioned that he used wind and other with his other works. So,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Sorry, could you repeat the last bit?
Where did you hear till?
You told me about the sculpture with Martin Luther King and Gandhi.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask, like, you mentioned that he had a lot of other kinetic sculptures. So, what kind of...
Sorry, I don't...
He's asking about the other kinetic sculptures, ones that are using water. The other kinetic sculptures.
What is
that second?
Yeah, what is the symbolism of water and wind in some of the other ones? Because I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Govind, for your question. It's quite interesting. He actually liked to use elements which in most of his sculptures, like this one with Monument to Love and Non-Violence. So water being constantly flowing is, as even in his film that he said that it, there's always movement and time. And with water, he's always used it as a depiction of something that he wants to share. Even the other sculpture that we showed you on the outside of our museum, which is supposed to be Ishwar Allah Tere Naam, is supposed to be a huge leaf, which again has water overflowing. And again, that water is supposed to be the world which is constantly flowing with time and people, but certain things that will be constant and will stay, especially people's ideals or the fact that we are the same on both sides of the leaf, we're the same people. His other sculpture regarding wind is the one that you're talking about, is the Monument to Aviation. Again, that was his idea of portraying speed. Again, aviation being wind and air. So he wanted to show, it was obviously back then was a big deal to be part of an airport. And yeah, so I think wherever he's used these elements, he's always wanting to portray something important like time, people, or in this case, when Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King is their ideals and models. Was that helpful?
Yeah, Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions? Any other questions there? Right. I wanted to ask you one about the sort of tapestries that he made, the carpets. That was interesting. That was very curious. How was he able to move to that? Did he ask the craftspeople to work for him and then, you know, work alongside, or?
Yes, he actually did. He traveled to Varanasi, and he was very inquisitive with different mediums. One more thing that I didn't share, in fact, is he also worked with gold as a medium. He made gold sculptures as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because he was just curious all the time to try out new types of like metal and material. With tapestries as well, he went to Varanasi and he worked with them in their home to create these pieces. And it was a collection of 12 that he'd made, each one very different from the other, and a big contrast to his other works, that you'd see. And so he actually, like, with this family in Varanasi, and he obviously conceptualized it, designed it down to every single bit, and we still have the paperwork that went behind everything that was made. And he was just so curious about just making something with any form of textiles. So this is what we've come out with.
Thank you so much. And we have another question. Ms. Singh, Sujata? Yes, Sujata?
She's on mute.
Sorry, I was mute. Yes.
Yeah.
Hello. I was very curious about his drawings and his paintings. And I was wondering if these were standalone pieces or were they a part of his process?
Thank you, Sujata, for your question. Yes, some of them were standalone pieces and some were collections by themselves. There's the whole epic episodes is about 54 to 55 works altogether, which is the Ramayana and Mahabharata. He did a lot of work on just making different kinds of heads of humans and things that he created, which later developed into sculptures as well. So that sort of created its own series. When he had something like the dragon and he had anguish cries, again, you will see a lot of his drawings that sort of developed into that sculpture. But a lot of his, another one I would talk about is the Ganesha series, is another series in itself that he did all together at the same time. But he started drawing very early, and he's been drawing, I think from his earliest drawing that we have is about 1946. So you can actually see his change over the years. So I wouldn't call everything into collections, but yeah, certain collections are there, and some you can actually make out how he's sort of grown with time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mandira. And I think if we don't have any more questions, I don't see any more hands up. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. That was so exciting. And as I said, to actually see the primary source, see a film where he's actually talking to you, that is very, very special. And I would also like to thank the TBS Live team for helping us to put the details of this lecture series together, and for all the other sort of work which goes into having this series going up. So thank you so much, and have a good weekend, everybody. Thank you all for being here. You were a great audience. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mandira, once again.
Thanks a lot.
We hope to make a trip as soon as we can.
Please, we're waiting for you all. We would have loved actually to have you all over.
Yes.
But as soon as this is done, please come.
Yes, we shall.
Thank you so much. We really enjoyed this.
Thank you. Thank you. See you soon.
I was particularly struck with the studio and the casting process of the bronze, because now it's a little more sophisticated, but then 60s and 70s, it was still very rough. And it's so interesting to see, you know, the feet, the beating of the feet, and the way in which the crucible was heated with that blower thing. Yeah, it's quite fascinating. It's quite fascinating.
In fact, we chose to show this bit only because we wanted to show exactly him working with the material, which you wouldn't see actually anymore.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But
no, it's very special that the family has been able to do this for him, you know?
Yes.
It's really very, very special. And because it is a family, you know, family collection, it has its own charm, and particularly, you know. So thanks again, Mandira, for taking the time out and for making those little video clips and all for us.
I hope you enjoyed the video clips.
It was lovely. Give you a sense of the museum, and as you went from, you know, level to level and inside and outside. So very nicely done. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Mandira. That was fantastic. So interesting, and I'm definitely going to visit the museum once it's possible.
Please do. We're really looking forward to it, and thank you so much for giving us this opportunity as well to be talking to your students here. So it's quite nice.
You're most welcome.
Anyway, it was so good. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I'm going to leave. Is that fine?
Yes, that's fine. I have to just wait for the students to all log off.
Okay.
And, yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Yes, thanks, Christine. Thank you so much. Another fantastic lecture.
Had a different feel to it because it was actually.
I hope the video was playing okay. It wasn't too.
It was a bit jerky, but I'll ask you to send me those files, please, Sean, so that we can go over it in the.
I have them all. So I'll share the folder with you with the videos and the presentation.
Please, and even of the earlier ones, the earlier two. So we get an idea of.
I've got a folder with all of the presentations I've received.
Super.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Enjoy your weekend.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye. You still got some students online, Devyani?
Do they have any questions?
I don't know. She didn't put up their hands.
Hi, Astrid. Did you enjoy?
Astrid is just leaving.
Okay.
And Anna is still here.
Oh, they're leaving.
Yeah.
Very nice. It was lovely.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was a different sort of, presentation.
So where is the museum?
And the clips. The museum is right there in Jangpura, in his house.
Oh, wow.
He converted the whole house to his museum.
Super. So it's quite easy to get there. Yeah.
Museum.
Yeah. Okay.
And what's nice is it hasn't been bought up by, Kiran Nadar or whatever. They've still kept it within the family. So that's quite special.
Wow.
His son has, done this for his father, Raman.
Must go, yeah.
Yeah.
And what happened to that mural? Did they finally get it back? The one that
I think litigation. It was sold for scrap. It's so sad, but that is actually the fate of a lot of public art now in India. You hear the story of Jatin Das's, his big painting that was there at the airport that was just taken down and thrown away in a corner.
What?
And there are many court cases. And in fact, that could be another, sort of level as to, because they've all taken the government to court, that you can't do this without, giving it back to the artist or, giving it to the National Museum or something like that.
Yes, it should. And that's also what's happening with the collection of Air India now, the art collection.
They're in fact selling it to try and make money for Air India. Can you imagine what a Taya Mehta is now? The Gaitonde went for 32 crores. Gaitonde.
Wow.
So it's big bucks there. Yeah.
It's also
I'm-
national property, isn't it? Yeah,
Yes,
it's
this
part
is
of our
what-
heritage.
This is what Jatin and all were saying, that this is a part of your heritage. And it's been, commissioned by a government, earlier government.
Yeah.
And just because you don't agree with the earlier government doesn't mean that you scrap the artwork. But,
Wow, fantastic. What a TOK question.
I know.
Okay. Chalo,
Shane.
thank you, Christine. That was amazing. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot. Have a good
Have
weekend.
a good weekend. You too. Bye.